Next up in the Wild Way to Lucid Dreaming, we'll be going over what is essentially like the most important part of the book, and we'll be talking about Slider's technique for having wilds or wake-initiated or wake-induced lucid dreams on command. And I think that the real key point in this book and in Slider's technique and approach to having wilds is he's going to talk about his way of essentially bypassing our body's natural sleep cycle process. And so I've covered this many times in previous videos over the years, and I've covered it a bunch of times in the different videos that we've been covering as we've been working our way through this book. But just in case this is someone's only video of mine that they see as we've been working our way through this book, I want to cover it one more time. If you already know this sleep cycle stuff, skip forward a minute or two and save yourself some time. But when we go to sleep, we essentially sleep in these 90-minute cycles, right? So depending on how long it is you sleep, you go through more or less of these 90-minute cycles. And typically speaking, the first 2 cycles of this sleep process, sort of roughly 3 hours of actually being asleep and not just lying in bed, you'll normally go from stage 1 hypnagogia, which is the main thing we've been talking about in this book and in the previous video, right, into stage 2 stuff. And then after that, you go into stages 3, 4, deep sleep, what they used to call dreamless sleep, although it's been pretty well established that there is still a dream of sorts to be had, an experience to be had when you're in those stages. Just that most of the time when people are in sleep labs and they wake them up when they're in this stage 3, 4 of sleep, is that to wake them up and the person won't report back that they were having any experience. However, they've gotten like more well-versed meditators and different dream yoga practitioners and stuff like that. And when they wake them up out of those states, they can report back an experience that they were having. It's just that the you know, your conscious mind is typically so turned off, it's hard to bring back a lot of that information even after, you know, even if they wake up immediately from there, it's still hard to retrieve that information a lot of times. But nonetheless, there is still an experience to be had in those states. That's where sleep yoga takes place versus dream yoga, which is like lucid dreaming stuff. And then after that, you hit REM, right, where classic dreams happen. So that happens in the first 90 minutes, the second 90 minutes for the most part. Most people will go through that again. There are some things you can do in there to kind of throw that process off. Like if you're really sleep deprived, then oftentimes you will go from stage 1 or stage 2 stuff directly into REM, even when you initially fall asleep for the night. But Slider has an approach here to kind of bypass all that. And even when you're going to sleep at the very beginning of the night, he can go from stage 1 of sleep directly into REM. Now, the problem is when he goes over his technique for actually pulling off that part, which I would say is, you know, probably the most difficult part of this whole process, at least in my opinion. It's only like a paragraph that he really goes into it, and I wish we would get into it a bit deeper. But nonetheless, let's hop in. So the end result of doing this relaxation technique thing that we were just covering in the previous video is that you should have a mild sensation of floating. This is oftentimes what I've referred to in the past as like the tingling sensation meditation. I think I named it something like that, where you can start off, a lot of times the tingling might start off in your extremities or maybe in like my lower abdomen. I can kind of search it out there in the beginning stages of it. But as you get deeper into it, it'll kind of just vibrate out through your entire body. And there are some telltale signs of this. Like he says, your hands might feel puffy, or you won't really be able to tell the proportion or size of them. Another one that I've noticed over the years is that for me, when I'm entering into this, when I'm going to sleep, period, or, you know, also doing this hypnagogic meditation stage 1 of sleep stuff, I like to be on my back. He recommends being on your left side. But when I'm getting there, I'll realize that I can't quite tell. Like, I know I'm still lying on my back, but I can't quite tell what position my legs are in, you know, so that just might be another little sign of, you know, you getting into the right state of relaxation that it is that you're looking for. Once you've reached this floating feeling of relaxation, the next step is to absolutely and deliberately turn your attention completely away from all and any sensations of the body altogether, completely ignoring them. And instead, you want to peer at the blank, the dark space behind your closed eyes. And so now he's going to get into basically observing early stage hypnagogic stuff, which I have covered so many times on the channel. But it can look like a lot of things, right? It could be like an odd blob here and there, a streak or something. You might see like a soft diffused light in maybe the center or in one of the corners or on the sides of what you can see behind your closed eyes. One that I can bring up on command once I get into a relaxed state, typically at the very bottom of my exhales, is I can bring up scene of like a starry night sky scene behind my closed eyes. But basically, you're looking for anything that is not uniform pitch blackness, which if you really pay attention, it basically never is complete uniform pitch blackness behind your closed eyes. He also recommends adjust your focus, so as if you're looking at an area 10 to 15 inches in front of your face. And so I like to compare this to like the type of view or perspective you'd want to have if you're doing an open eye meditation, where say you're looking at a picture on the wall in front of you, right? Using that as your object of attention. You don't want to like focus in on that image and try to make it really clear and crisp. You kind of are like having this soft diffuse gaze towards it, almost like you're looking at the space in between it, so it's a little bit blurred out. So that's kind of the perspective I like to have when I'm observing these hypnagogic images as they start to come up. Because if you do try to bring it too clearly into focus, it basically just wakes you up and blanks everything out. Then you got to start over again. If that does happen though, and that will absolutely happen as you're playing around in this hypnagogic space, don't sweat it, right? You're already like right there on the edge. So if you wake up out of it, it's all good. Just continue to relax, maybe do his relaxation techniques, kick back in bed, keep your eyes closed, and then just wait for another hypnagogic type imagery to pop up, and then you can carry on from there. And then eventually these hypnagogic images will progress into being this like odd blob here and there, or the starry night sky thing, into seeing like a flash of an image, right? Sometimes you can go straight from this soft diffuse light into like a full-on moving images, but the general progression will be like this. You see like a flash of an image, which is essentially like these random thoughts and images you have kind of just running in the back of your head all the time. But as you start to get, you know, more relaxed and enter into this stage when the sleep stuff, you'll actually be able to see them visually, or they'll pop up. Sometimes they pop up really quick, sometimes they can stay there for a bit longer. Eventually, you'll start to see some movement in these images, and then past that, they'll actually start to be like a full-on moving image, like you're watching a movie or something like that. And then the real key difference between hypnagogia and like REM-style dreams is that in this hypnagogic state, it's more like you're watching it versus you actually being in it in the first person, like you are in waking life and like you are in most REM-style dreams. What else? Just attempt to keep the image within view by deliberately examining its details, but not examining it too hard. Now, if you try to focus on it too much, it will cause you to wake up. Don't fixate your eyes on any single aspect of that image or attempt to try to force anything, because the likelihood is that it will just vanish away, only to be replaced with another image moments later. You know, he goes on for more, but we'll kind of skip all that. Let's get to the main point. So here's the real like crux of this technique and how he tries to bypass the body's typical sleep cycle process. At this point, you now have two choices. The first of which is to carry on watching and wondering, plus enjoying this really incredible experience just for its own sake, which is typically what I'll do. In which case, at some point, you'll likely fall fully asleep and wake up the next day as usual, right? So eventually, as you're watching this process, even if you get there and you're super lucid and conscious, most of the time you're going to end up losing that conscious awareness and you're going to completely fall asleep and then just drift off into, you know, regular sleep as we typically do. Watching these really clear images for any length of time, as marvelous as they may be, always leads to falling away into a normal sleep. Okay, on the other hand, and so this is like the main point of this whole book, it's like a sentence or two long. Okay, on the other hand, if you instead stare at one of them and attempt to examine the finer details, and I wish we would get more into how he examines these finer details without, you know, doing the thing I was just talking about. You focus on the image too much, and then it causes you to wake up and blank everything out. But on the other hand, instead, if you stare at one of them and attempt to examine the finer details of it, something very strange happened. A sensation of what can only really be described as a kind of zooming in, right? And very often, not all the time, but there will be this strong physical, like body higher sensation of being pulled into the image. And it really is shocking most of the time when that happens. Like when you do pull this off for the first time, I would imagine 100% of the time it will cause the person to go like, oh shit, I did it, or that's cool, or what is that feeling? And then they wake up out of it and everything blanks out and you got to start back at the very beginning. But nonetheless, there is oftentimes this zooming in. Not all the time. Like what I've noticed is if I'm sleeping through the night, I wake up out of a dream, right? I've already been asleep for whatever, 5-6 hours. And then I just keep my eyes closed and try to re-enter back into the same dream. This is how I have most of my wilds, is that I'm replaying the dream in my head once I briefly wake. mostly to commit it to memory. And then as I'm kind of going through that, committing it to memory, if I'm lucky enough to fall asleep very quickly, you can enter right back into REM instead of like say having that whole sleep cycle end and then you got to go back into stage 1 into stage 2 and then REM. A lot of times when I'm in that sort of a state, I don't get that strong zooming in or sucking in feeling and this good body high that goes along with it. However, if I'm able to pull off a wild from when I initially lie down in bed, again, typically for me, I would have to be very sleep deprived, so I can kind of skip this whole stage 3, 4 stuff and go this early stages of sleep, like stage 1 directly into REM. When I'm doing it that way, I pretty much all the time, maybe 100% of the time, the vast majority of the time, do get this really strong zooming in, body high, tingling, I guess it's kind of is like a tingling sensation that goes along with it. Geez. Anyway, rambled on a bit there. The book doesn't totally end with that. Here, maybe we'll try to throw this in there. Well, folks, this is the secret of doing it. If you can call it a secret exactly because it's so simple, it's a joke. This is it in its entirety. That's all there is to it, and as such, you can do whatever you like. Lucid dreaming on demand every time you so wish. Although for the life of me, I can't see any reason why anyone would ever want to return to normal sleep and dreams after this. Can you? Anyway, a couple more paragraphs, but we'll leave it there. And until the next video, keep your lucid dreaming practice legit.